866-509-7268 if you want to call in throughout the hour. And for those of you who, since it'll be a topic here, I guess in Ottawa, where their parliament is, in Canada, they targeted 3 sites. Don't know who they are yet. And a soldier was shot at a memorial. And in Parliament, I don't quite know what has happened there, but I do know it would appear now that the sergeant-at-arms was able to fell the gunman in there, and I don't quite know. It's a fluid situation, as I said. The shopping mall, I don't quite know what happened. There's our guest. Mark, unbelievable that you were booked today for an hour just to talk about it, and I'm going the opposite of lucky, but I'm saying it's propitious because I think, like I said, nobody sees the world, I believe. Think of Mark as like the total exact opposite of Walter Duranty. I think he understands exactly what's happening. And Mark, your thoughts on the shootings in Ottawa today, or what you know up to this point?
Well, I'm very sad about it because this is a corner of the world I know very well. I always stay in the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. It's across the street from the Cenotaph, from the National War Memorial, where this poor soldier died, and it's right next door to the Canadian Parliament. And what I've always loved about Ottawa, I was there a couple of months ago. I had dinner with a very good friend of mine who's a big-time political figure in the cabinet there, and we strolled through the streets back to the Chateau Laurier. No entourage, no motorcade. It's such a lovely, relaxed. It's the opposite of Washington. It's not a homeland security lockdown. Show us your social security number. Run your bags. Let's do the cavity search. It's the opposite of that. It's always been intimate, relaxed. And I'm devastated at the thought that will all be lost because we in the Western world have opened our doors to a lot of people who stood up and took their oath of allegiance to the Queen and became Canadian citizens, and they became French and Belgian and Australian and American, and it's all lies. They don't mean it. We have essentially imported a fifth column to pull stuff like this. And we will pay the price for it.
Yeah. How many of them have mentally spell checked Allah into the word the Queen, by the way? And I don't even know. I don't even know what happened there today, folks. But there's been enough track record to know that we have lost our minds about not accepting the fact that we are in a cosmic war that'll probably last until, well, as wars do, till one side ends, the other side, with jihad. And if there's one thing sadder than lambs being led to the slaughter, it's lambs going on Yelp and giving the slaughterhouse a thumbs up. And that's the point where we're at right now in this world. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's in that sense, it's not just a Canadian story, because these people are not. These people may have Canadian passports, but it's also a Minneapolis story, where I was a couple of days ago, because Minneapolis is the biggest American supplier of soldiers for ISIS over there. It's a Denver story. 3 Denver schoolgirls have been arrested in Turkey. They're U.S. citizens, supposedly, but they want to go and fight for ISIS. What we have here is quite a sophisticated operation marked by what is characteristic of all these guys, that they take advantage of the fact that we are free societies, and the price of a free society, where you do have freedom of movement, is that all kinds of other people can burrow in. And I think about this poor guy from the I think he was with the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. He's a guy from Hamilton, Ontario. He was on duty at the Canadian War Memorial, shot at point-blank range in the chest. That's not a guy... He's not like the guys with the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry who's out fighting in Helmand Province in Afghanistan, and he knows to be alert because the guys are... you know you're in a war zone. This guy was on ceremonial duty at a sacred spot, a symbolic spot, whether it's the tomb of the unknown soldier, it honors Canada's dead in the First World War, was opened by George VI, the Queen's dad, and so it has symbolic power. You are shooting a soldier dead at a symbolic and sacred site of the Canadian state. And then you go over to the Canadian Parliament and you rampage through there. And their message to us is it doesn't matter where you aren't safe. It's not a question. You don't have to be in some broken-down loser village in the western desert of Iraq by the Syrian border, because they will hack you to death in the streets of London, and they will do it to you in Ottawa. And I'm not entirely unpersuaded that what happened in Oklahoma City, where some guy whose Facebook page basically takes the same attitude to ISIS that my sister took to Donny Osmond when she was a teenager. I mean, this guy has a fan page for jihad. I'm not persuaded that Oklahoma City thing isn't actually part of this same story.
Yes, McVeigh, the one who's always brought up as the anomalous situation. And I guess before that, they had to go back to Aldo No Moro in the Red Brigade in the back seat of the car.
Right.
But the simple fact is, folks, if you're not going to read these breadcrumbs and see that we've got serious problems with the jihadi sector of Islam, and any time you're talking about 1.2 billion people who believe in something, if you get a scintilla of a sliver of a percent of those who are nuts with it, you've got big problems on your hand. Now, I agree with Mark. We'll talk more about this after the break. The fact that we now that every 10th person has to be checked at an airport, when the fact is that it's only applicable if you're at war with every 10th person. We're not. I like the LL approach. Anybody from that part of the world is going to have to explain to me what they're up to before they even get to the airport. Stuff like that. Unless we're going to take that tact, this is the price we're going to pay. Every few days, we're going to have some cat, like Mark said, standing there, almost like the kid at the museum or at the Tomb of the Lost Soldier or the Unknown Soldier. These guys getting wasted by punks. And if people say, how do you know it's Islam? I know it's a terrorist act at this point. And if I'm going to go down the road and say who usually does terrorists, I'll go there. I could be wrong. Guess what? If I'm not going to be apologetic about it because they've got a crap track record on this. Mark Steyn for the entire hour. He's got a new book. We'll get to that in a bit. The Undocumented Mark Steyn. His website is Steyn, Steyn, online.com. He's the smartest cat I've met. Dennis Miller Show. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Dennis Miller Show. We're joined by the brilliant Mark Steyn for the entire hour. His new book, The Undocumented Mark Steyn, the UN is in parentheses here and in paralysis in the real world. And his website is SteynOnline.com. You know what I'm starting to find absolutely heartbreaking, Mark, and you referred to this in your feelings at the beginning, how this area near and dear to your heart, you know the lay of the land, but the predictable manner of how we handle it after. I'm watching the same press conference now, and soon we'll see the flowers against the wall. And it's almost like we're now exhibiting a high degree of alacrity as far as first responding to these things, where I believe that we have to get more preemptively eradicative and preclude these things happening.
I think you're right, and I'm actually I loved your bit just before you went into the break, because I'm actually fighting hard, not to get angry here. 2 days ago at Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, which is the home of the Collège Militaire Royal, the Royal Military College for Francophone soldiers. So it's the Canadian equivalent of something like the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis or whatever. In other words, it's a town you can go to and know that you will find soldiers. And some Muslim revert went and ran down 2 soldiers.
I saw that.
One of whom has died. And this guy, what was fascinating to me is that this guy was someone, he was a Francophone Quebecer, purebred, as they say up there, and he had converted to Islam about a year ago. And I think this is this idea now wherein for the usual thing, as you say, the the press conference, the reports from the mainstream media, which say the motives for this attack are unknown. They're a great mystery to us. What could possibly have motivated people to do this? And then we get, as you say, the weepy stage, the passivity, the flowers, and then we get the politicians, the Obamas and David Camerons insisting that, no, this is nothing to do with Islam. No matter how many heads you chop off, it's something to do with Islam, because every Western prime minister and president is apparently an expert Quranic scholar now and knows exactly what is and is Islam better than the guys who claim to be devout Muslims chopping their heads off. And it's that passivity.
Yes.
The Premier of Quebec declared that incident at Saint-Jean, he declared it a spontaneous act of extremism. And if you've been behind these idiot, like in Vermont, and you come up behind an NPR listener who's got that bumper sticker, the Coexist bumper sticker, and next to it the one that says commit random acts of kindness, and then you know you're behind some feeble, weepy, passive NPR listener who's no threat to you. But if you come up behind the bumper sticker that says commit spontaneous acts of extremism, you should probably take the first left and get off that road and head in another direction. I mean, this is the rubbish with which the dishonesty and the evasiveness with which we attempt to combat an enemy that is quite open about what it wants to do to our society.
Yeah, I think the machine of state should have a gun rack in the window, whatever you want to do. At some point.
Actually, you know something. That's not far from what happened. This sergeant at arms who killed the shooter, that's like a ceremonial position. I mean, they're not quite doublet and hose guys, but like the guy in the House of Commons in London, he actually wears stockings and buckled shoes and knickerbockers, and it's usually held by a retired military officer or a retired policeman who's hoping for a quiet life. And this guy, and so again, it's a ceremonial position, and this guy suddenly had to make the snap decision where your ceremonial duties in an ancient parliament suddenly turn real. And you have to take down an enemy, and thank goodness that the Sergeant of Arms in the Canadian Parliament understood that moment and switched from ceremonial to attack mode.
Yeah, I think some people have to play the politically correct game in public because you dare not reveal that you still have primal human instincts. But I'm reminded of the guy at Va Tech when he was shooting the school up, and he kicked the door into that one professor's room who had been a victim of the Holocaust. And the guy looked up. All the kids thought it was a video game, but the old professor looks up. He looks at those eyes, and he sees the same eyes that he saw in the food slot at Buchenwald, and he just runs towards the guy and says, I know what this is about. I've seen this drill. We better get the eye of the tiger, or these guys are going to just walk over us, and they're going to chortle all the way to their, whatever their idea of eternity is, and how willingly complicit we were in it. We're talking more...
And you know, you're absolutely right about that, Dennis, and it was because that guy was old enough, and the decades fell away in a nanosecond. And I forget where he was from. He was from Budapest or Bucharest. He was from somewhere out in Eastern Europe, and he knew what that moment meant.
Yes,
a guy in his 70s, whereas all the other people, all the kids there, as you say, they thought it was a video game. They didn't understand. Their instincts didn't kick in, and that's what's so disturbing about these things.
What about 3 young girls heading on their own dime to help with Islam? Do they not realize that they're over there? If a woman is raped, she gets stoned to death for putting out the rape vibe. It's absolutely crazy. Our kids are so disengaged. They're looking to belong to anything. When I was young, it was the Columbia Record and Tape Club. You've got morons out there, instead of ordering all 4 Kiss albums to count as one selection, are going over to join ISIL, for God's sakes.
Well, you know, the Columbia Record and Tape Club, it actually gives you more sense of identity than the modern multicultural state. I mean, there's a hole in the heart And that's why these South Londoners who hacked drummer Rigby to death on the streets of Woolwich,
yes.
Nigerian Christians who converted to Islam because it gave them a sense of identity. This Quebecer who ran over the soldiers on Monday converted to Islam because it gave him a sense of identity. And not everyone does. Other people are perfectly content to go nuts about climate change or to go crazy about Justin Bieber. But for a certain proportion of people, in the hollow nullity of the modern multicultural state, they go looking for identity, and they find it with this pan-Islamic imperialism.
Folks, think of it as the same kids who used to say they dug the Stones more than the Beatles, because the Beatles were the Fab Four and the Stones were causing, as it turns out, paid-for riots. There's always going to be kids looking to be the anti, and now we've got the anti being ISIL. And the moment they get there and they're of no use to those guys anymore, they send them back in two boxes, one for their head and one for the rest of their body. And if we don't start getting together, and I don't know what you want to call it, collectively spanking young people and getting them back into some sort of civilized mode where they just hate us because we're square as opposed to hating us because we're not jihadist, then it's all lost. We better wake up. Mark Steyn, right after the break, Dennis Miller Show.
The Dennis Miller Show.
The genius of Lorenz Hart and Richard Rodgers. Yeah, I'm kidding, Mark. Mark, have you ever, by the way, on just a quick lighter note, have you ever seen the sanitization of the Rasputin-like life of Lorenz Hart done with Mickey Rooney in words and music? Have you seen that movie?
Yes, I have seen that. Where he dates this tall showgirl for the first half of the movie, and then she politely explains to him
and he's ruined.
And that is actually a delightfully hilarious film.
Yeah, I like the incongruity of it too. It's funny to me. And by the way, I saw a movie last week with who was the guy who was married to Sid Charisse, that singer.
Oh, Tony Martin. Yeah,
I saw Tony Martin and Janet Leigh in the most amazingly weird film about where 2 tickets to Broadway, and at the end they do that like the world's most politically incorrect Indian number where they're all running around dressed as papooses.
I know, that's where you see the real subversive stuff now, the sort of penultimate song and dance number.
Right, the MGM numbers. The Arthur Freed unit was subversive.
Yeah, it's edgy, it's dangerous.
There you go. We're talking to Mark Steyn. Mark's new book is The Undocumented Mark Steyn, and the subtitle of that is Don't Say You Weren't Warned. And I have to say, Mark's book, America Alone, folks, I told you about, when did I go on the air? 8 years ago, I was reading this book. I said, you got to read the book. It would make Nostradamus look forgetful, for God's sakes, how you nailed down things. And it's paying off today. I'm watching them evacuate, not paying off, paying negative dividends. I'm watching this evacuate. You know, we've got our evacuation drill now, and no doubt there'll be some bureaucratic functionary telling you to slow down as you evacuate the building where they're shooting it up. And my feeling is at some point you got to pick a mountain range over in that part of the world, give people 3 days, and then just level it with a nuke and say, quit screwing around. Quit screwing around.
You know, that's the choice. Really, is that you can actually decide to fight this thing, or you can just put up more barricades, more security scanners. We can all take off more clothes when we go and catch some routine domestic commuter flight, and they can reduce the amount of gels. We're coming up to Thanksgiving. The TSA has rules on the consistency of pumpkin pie pie. Because if you have that horrible dried pumpkin pie, you know, with the cracks in it, like the Nevada desert, like when you're flying over the Grand Canyon and you see the great crevasse through the... If you've got a dried-out pumpkin pie like that, you can take it on the plane. But if you've got a moist, succulent pumpkin pie, it counts as liquid, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda could weaponize your nice, moist pumpkin pie, so you can't take it on the plane. And so the question is whether we're going to have a million more stupid rules like that, or whether we're actually going to address the fact that we're up against an ideology and drive a stake through that ideology. And I said to you earlier, Dennis, I don't like the big security stake. I'd much rather wander around in Canberra or in Ottawa, where you've got nice, small, intimate capitals, and as opposed to Washington, where the Department of Paperwork, it takes you 45 minutes to get inside because you have to produce your Social Security number, you have to undergo a background check, and all the rest of it. And if it's a choice between giving up that freedom in Ottawa, or actually saying, you know, the price of mass Muslim immigration is too high. Yes, there are plenty of loyal, peaceable Western Muslims, but there is an issue here, and the price of mass Muslim immigration is too high.
Yeah, and if the Muslim world doesn't want to treat it like the Yankee clubhouse, where somebody's assing off, Jeter, well, somebody new now, but Jeter last year would have got them and taken care of it in-house. If they don't want to do that, then I agree with you. It's got to be like El Al, where you're a guy with a hyphen in your name and somebody who's former Mossad calls you 3 weeks before and go, what's your deal? Where are you going? Why are you going there? You know, we got to start getting, well, as I said, I'm at the point where I think we should get preemptively eradicative. And I think somebody should have to prove over in that part of the world that they're not a training ground for nutcases, and flip this whole jury system we've got here where everybody's innocent till proven guilty, because it's going to get us blown up. We're talking to Mark.
I think we also need an end to one-way multiculturalism, Dennis. This idea that somehow an advanced Western society has to be a home to everybody. But Saudi Arabia can ban the Bible, and Afghanistan can raze to the ground the last Christian church on our dime, on our watch, while Hamid Karzai is being kept alive by NATO troops and NATO money. He had the last Christian church in Afghanistan razed to the ground 3 or 4 years ago on our watch, on our dime. Your listeners funded the regime that razed that last Christian church to the ground.
And anybody who wants more information on this, you should read a chapter in, and there are times I don't get him, but this is a pretty good New England primer tutorial, From Beirut to Jerusalem by Thomas Friedman. Read the chapter called Hama Rules and see what we're up against. We're Marcus of Queensberry. Read what Hama rules are over there, and you understand what we're up against. We've got Joe in Oregon. Joe, you're on with Mark Steyn.
My brother, I want to thank you for the things that you're saying right now. First of all, I'm going to make this as quick as I can. Sharia law. I think the American people have no idea what it is to have a head tax, what it is to live in these areas and these places where if you are other than an Islam or a Muslim or an Arab, then you have to pay. If you don't, you either convert or you die. That is... when I hear these people say Islam is a religion of peace, bless them, man. Good for you, brother. But when you get up 17,000 feet up in the hills and you see what's going on in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Joe, in other words, you can condense their thing down to a bumper sticker, too. It's just usually plastered on a car. They're driving somewhere to blow up a joint to make their point. Thank you, Joe, in Oregon. Mark, the October 13th piece you wrote just made me laugh so hard because it is true. It is hitting the fan in every single direction, and all they're worried about is how we're powering the fan, and this is causing global warming. What happens at the end of the day if we find out global warming is caused specifically by the Muslim world's white-hot hate for the Jews? How's about that?
we laugh at this, but there are people in the EPA, there are people in NOAA, there are eminent scientists and scientific bodies all over the world who will advance the theory that, for example, Boko Haram, those fellows who kidnapped those Nigerian girls, and Michelle Obama devastatingly responded by holding up a piece of cardboard with a hashtag written on it and putting on a sad face saying, "Bring back our girls." There was a piece published in The Guardian saying that what was the problem there was that was climate change. That climate change had heated up Nigeria to the point where Boko Haram gets so hot under the collar that they have to start kidnapping girls and turning them into sex slaves, which is at odds, since you mentioned Rogers and Hart a moment ago, that's odd with the whole thesis of Cole Porter's Too Darn Hot, which is when the thermometer gets too high, you're just not in the mood because you're sweating too much. So there's a difference between Cole Porter and Boko Haram and the climate scientists on this. But that's basically the idiocy you're dealing with, that climate change heats up the planet and then people go full jihad on you.
I don't know, Marky, just candidly, as candid as we can be on, I never imagine, I used to laugh a little at first about political correctness, maybe 20 to 25 years ago. But in the back of my head, there was something Orwellian. I thought, these things always spin out of control. And indeed, if we are to be done in, it would appear that the contagion that we need worry the most about is not Ebola, but political correctness.
Yeah, and you and I have been laughing at this for a long time. Tom Wolfe, the great Tom Wolfe, Bonfire of the Vanities, he wrote a novel called I Am Charlotte Simmons, and I had a drink with him in New York a couple of years ago, and he told me that when he was researching that novel, and he went to campuses, and they did the politically correct thing, he thought the students were at the back of the room rolling their eyes. And I don't think so. I think when you marinate 2 generations in that nonsense, then there's an almost reflexive urge. It doesn't matter what it is. When somebody chops the head off one of your fellow American citizens or a British subject or whoever it is, and they post the video on YouTube, for as many people who say these are barbarians, there are far more people saying, "Oh well, who are we to judge?"
Yes.
And falling into that multicultural cringe that is actually really killing us. Islam is just the opportunist infection, but it's actually this multicultural cringe that's actually that's so destroyed our immune system that some barbarous nut with a scimitar is just the guy taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and the American reaction, no doubt, somewhere down the road, probably in the near future, we'll be scheduling direct flights from Denver over there, so the kids don't have to stop.
That's right. They shouldn't have to go via Turkey. They should just be able to go from Denver to sort of the Infidel Slayer International Airport in the middle of the Iraqi Western Desert. Straight flight, you can be off there chopping the heads off people 20 minutes after landing.
Yeah, and they'll have onboard Wi-Fi so you can tweet your hatred for the Jews while still in midair. It's unbelievable what's happened. Mark's with us for another segment. This is the Dennis Miller Show.
It's the time of the season.
Now that is a groovy song. We've been talking to Mark Steyn. I would say through our naivete and enforced political correctness, we're sitting ducks, but then I remembered that recent legislation has outlawed foie gras, too, so you can't even say we're sitting ducks anymore. Mark's new book is The Undocumented Mark Steyn. His website is steynonline.com. Explain the book, Mark. We should do a little biz here and why I believe I understand why un is in parentheses, but explain the concept of the book and the overlay to the listeners.
Yeah, it's a bit like a sort of bumper column Wednesday, as it were, in that these are all kind of my greatest hits. You don't hit it out the park every time, but once in a while you get something that's your Bohemian Rhapsody, or I Will Always Love You,
that you're
or
proud of.
Bridge Over Troubled Water, or My Way, and this book essay-wise, is the nearest I get to Bridge Over Troubled Water or My Way. So it's like greatest hits.
Whoa.
We seem to have lost Mark there, and that sounded rather definitive, so we'll try to get him back. But that didn't sound like usual. We've got a bug on the line. That sounded like somebody was trying to put a gazebo in their backyard and didn't call the local authorities to see what's under the surface and use the backhoe and snip the coaxial cable and, that whole drill. Remember, always call ahead and see where the gas line is, because you'd like to stay alive to be mortified by the quality of your DIY workmanship as opposed to the fact that you were the idiot who snipped the cable that blew up the neighborhood. I think the last guy who did that was Wilson Good in Philadelphia, and he's still living that down. We'll tread water here. See, that's how I tread water. Yeah. I can't even tell you what I just said. This segment of the show is brought to you by Barbasol Arctic Chill with menthol. I've never been to the Arctic, but my face thinks it was there this morning. So lather up with Barbasol, America. And while Mark's not here yet, this segment of the show is brought to you by AutoZone. Make sure your headlights and wipers are ready for winter, nuclear winter driving conditions. See better and drive safer with help from AutoZone. Get in the zone, AutoZone. There's Mark Steyn back. Mark, one of the things by the way, I have 2 collections of everybody's books in my house where I've saved, or 3, I should say. I've saved everything Michael Crichton ever wrote, and I have it in a section, Thomas Sowell and Mark Steyn. And if you go to order the book on Mark's website, just get the whole batch. There's great Broadway stuff. There's the most fascinating obit book. And, like I said, the prescience is unmatched. The new book is The Undocumented Mark Steyn. His website is steinonline.com. I was watching an interesting piece last night on how the guy in Colorado is still selling the war on women thing. And by the way, we have, we're allowed to say war on women, but not war on terror. And my thought is a little less labia, a little more Libya, and we'd all be better off. But the fact is, the feminist movement, isn't it funny that instead of being rendered helpless by males, it would appear from the first time I saw Virginia Slim's ad in Sports Illustrated in 1968, they wanted to get to the point where they could be helpless on their own as opposed to having it enforced on them. It boggles my mind.
Yeah, and your slogan, a little more labia and a little less labia and a little more Libya. That's actually the same slogan as the clitoridectomy clinic has in southern Sudan. So you're actually quite good on that. And that is actually the real war on women. These things are, these women who are being taken as sex slaves. Why is the National Organization of Women not saying anything about that? Why does it have a position on Todd Aiken, but it's got nothing to say about honor killings? I mean, it's got nothing to say about arranged marriages. It's got nothing to say about female genital mutilation. I mean, I'm just so tired of pretend first world problems. I'm so tired of these people who just want to fight cardboard enemies instead of actually addressing what's really going on in the world. It drives me nuts, Dennis.
Me too. I always think of Bill Clinton leaving Juanita Broderick's room and saying, by the way, if you want to abort that, go ahead. And he's the feminist all of a sudden.
Right. And actually, that piece is in my book. Gloria Steinem's pretzel explanation as to why dropping your pants to a woman and inviting her to kiss it is not a sexual assault. That he took no for an answer, and so he is a model feminist, and that's why they're defending him. And so all you got, that's the Bill Clinton rule book. You just, that nice girl at the water cooler, you just drop your pants to her, and if she says no, you take no for an answer, and you shuffle away without trying to trip up over your belt and your socks, and you pull your pants up and you take no for an answer. Gloria Steinem wrote that piece in the New York Times, and they took it seriously.
Yeah, it's unbelievable hypocrisy. And by the way, I see Mark also has included a great column on environmental matters with the light bulbs. And I'm sorry, folks, but I have not worked my entire adult life to have a curlicue light bulb that makes my living room look like a fight scene in an Eastern Bloc stairwell in the Bourne Ultimatum. I'm not doing it. I don't care if I have to smuggle them in through mules from some other country. I'm getting light bulbs into the country.
Yeah, no, that's at the simple 23-point plan toward disposing of one of those light bulbs if it breaks, which involves a pack of playing cards, duct tape, and 2 mason jars. And who doesn't have them handy near every light socket in their house? I mean, that's, again, it's like first world problems. You know, you eventually become so advanced a society that you decide the Edison's light bulb is the greatest threat you face. You know, it's the opposite of the eureka moment. We've punched our own lights out.
I know. We are now approving of a quality of life that Edison would have passed on in his search for an ideal filament. That's how
I know. He just said, this is never going to work.
We got to make it better than this, boys, or they're not going to buy it. All right.
Buy this? You can't read a book by this.
We've been talking to Mark Steyn. Mark's new book is The Undocumented Mark Steyn. His website is steynonline.com. We all collectively join Mark in mourning the events today in Ottawa, but please, for once, we've got to wake up and get preemptive about this. Thank you, Mark. Talk at you down the road.
Always a pleasure, Dennis, even on a sad day. Thanks a lot.
Computer crashes down and cloning well, they're multiplying. Fashion shoots with Becky Hansen, Courtney Love, and Marilyn Manson. You're all bitch, run to your mansions. Come around, we'll kick your...
The Dennis Miller Show on Westwood One.